A couple of weeks ago, I was really lucky and got invited to Kuala Lumpur to go and get my hands on possibly the most exciting phone that you can get your hands on, the HUAWEI Mate XT Ultimate Design. I actually did a video on this a couple of months ago, but when I got my hands on it, I only got 20 minutes with it, and it left me with more questions than it did answers, like how would the battery last, how would the exposed part of that screen hold up, and how could I fit this into my daily life. And I might be one of the only people outside of China that has been using the HUAWEI Mate XT as their daily phone for the last month or so. So how does the world's most expensive phone hold up? Now, this has been with me wherever I go, so for flights, for trips, for my everyday, this has been in my pocket and being used. And before I get into this properly, let's just remember the price of this, okay? It is 3,500 euros, which is the equivalent to around about $3,800. So everything has to be perfect for that price. And while it does a lot of things well, there are also a lot of shortcomings that make this a really hard recommendation to anyone actually looking to rush out and buy this phone. But you have to just appreciate just for a second what Huawei have done here. Like, this is a bit of an engineering marvel. It is a tri-folding display that has a 10.2-inch screen that you can fold down to put into your pocket. That really is just nothing else like this that you can get your hands on. You just can't get bored of having a tablet-sized screen that fits into your pocket. When it's closed, it's about the same thickness as Samsung's Z Fold 6, but when it is fully folded, this then not just becomes the only tri-fold in the world, it then just becomes the slimmest folding phone in the world. So again, you have to give credit to Huawei for what they've done here, because it's pretty incredible. Let me start with the whole phone's party trick, and it's having those three displays. So first off, you get a 6.4-inch cover display, and then when you fold it open once, that then becomes a 7.9-inch folding display, and then you fold it open for a second time, and that is where you get that 10.2-inch tablet-sized display that can then all fold down to fit in your pocket. And let me tell you, you do not get bored of opening this phone up. It's like a tech lover's dream. I honestly love this. And you'd think that you'd have to be super careful with how you unfold this, but you don't. It just takes a few tries to remember to open it the right way, and if you open it the wrong way, it will tell you, but after that, you are good to go. And it mostly opens flat. Like, you have to slightly fold the cover display and jiggle it about to get there, but there really is nothing to complain about on that front. And that hinge is sturdy. Like, it can keep the phone open at almost any angle, and that's what you want it to be, because a little bonus of this is that when you watch movies, you can actually use the cover display as a kickstand for the 7.9-inch display. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same, that cover display is just going to get scratched and damaged if you're using it as a kickstand and putting it down on loads of surfaces to actually use the 7.9-inch display. But you'd be wrong, because it actually is holding up really well. It has a protective film over that display, and it does have a few marks on it, but nothing more than any other phone that I've used. And I've purposely not been careful when using the Mate XT, because I really wanted to see how it would hold up, because I think durability is probably the biggest question, and so far it's held up really well. If you've ever seen pictures or videos of this before, or even in this video, you'll notice that there is a small part on the phone here, there is an exposed part of the screen. So that hinge is the display. And the big question I always get asked is, how is that hinge holding up? And actually, it's holding up really well. So far, there is no scratches on it. There is no dents on it. There is nothing, because as soon as that part of the display is damaged, you know, the whole screen itself is going to get damaged and isn't going to be used anymore. But I don't know what Huawei have done to make sure that is protected so well, but it is holding up very well. But it is that tablet-like display that we need to talk about, because I've never been stopped in an airport in my life, but unfolding this display actually had people stop and talk to me about it because they wanted to know what phone this was. And the aspect ratio is 16:11, so if you're ever watching content on this, those black bars that you usually get on traditional foldables just aren't there. And the OLED display on this also, it just looks fantastic. I've not really noticed myself doing any sort of multitasking on this or using it to do anything productive. I just find out that it comes in really handy when you're trying to watch films on a plane or traveling, because yeah, it's great having a folding display at 7.9 inches, but what's better than a folding display? Well, a tablet display. No matter what part of that display you're using, everything looks great. The colors are accurate, and even having 2 creases on the display, which you think might cause a bit of a problem, doesn't really bother you, because for most of the time you're using it, you don't really notice that they're there unless the light catches it. But when you're watching a lot of content, they do kind of disappear into what you're watching. The one question that I had for Huawei, and that I spoke to others about, is just how well this phone would hold up because of its battery. Now, the battery is not huge for the size of display it has. It only has a 5,600 mAh battery, which in most phones would be absolutely fine, but this is about half of what a tablet has and has about the same screen size. And let me tell you, this is holding up really well, like surprisingly well. I used this on a flight for about 12 hours straight recently that started at 100%, and by the time that I'd landed back home in Manchester from Singapore, I still had 27% left, which for me was a little bit wild. I fully expected to be able to get around maybe 5 hours out of this when I was using it on its fully folded display. So the fact that it was able to last so long and still have above 20% battery left, it kind of left me surprised at how well this battery is holding up. But one of the ways that Huawei seems to be able to make sure you can get extended battery life is by only having these displays run at 90 Hz. And I actually didn't realize they weren't running at 120 Hz until I went into the settings and accidentally found that it was only 90 Hz. So for me, that's not a massive issue, and I'd rather drop down to 90 Hz and have more battery than have 120 Hz and be losing hours of battery life. Now, I told you how good the displays were, but it's when you start to dig into this phone as a phone, that's where it starts to let you down a bit. Remember, this is €3,500, so almost $4,000, and for that you don't get an IP rating of any sort. So even in light rain, I'd be very careful using this outside. And even though it hasn't been confirmed by Huawei, this is running the Kirin 9010. So when it comes to its benchmarks, it really falls below what you'd expect. And in fact, for me, it was even surprising how bad this ran through benchmarks. Now, software-wise, it seems to handle everything really well, and playing some light games on it, there really isn't a problem. However, the benchmarks really do tell you that this is below par in terms of its performance. There's no eSIM support either on this, and outside of China, this can't connect to 5G networks, so you're only going to be getting 4G speeds. And the other problem is you have no NFC on this. Well, you kind of do have NFC on this, like it will almost attempt to pay, but there is no way you can actually pay with tap and pay with this, which again, a huge letdown. And of course, it's running EMUI for the global market, which is based on Android 12, and it does a great job of animations when folding between those displays. But other than that, it doesn't really do much else right. My biggest gripe on this, that there is no app drawer, and I have looked and I have asked Huawei for this, but there just isn't one. So you can't remove apps from that home screen. So the only option you have if you want to get rid of an app off that home screen is to uninstall it. And it's just so weird, like it doesn't make any sense. And the other option to try and get rid of those apps is to put them into a folder, which is like 10 pages long, and it just really doesn't make any sense. Like, it's a little bit irritating. And if you think you can get past that, then just remember there is still no Google Play services on this phone, so being able to use Google Wallet or Android Auto is never going to happen. However, you will notice that I do have the whole suite of Google apps on my Mate XT. Now, you can get Gmail, Google Maps, Chrome, Google Messages all working flawlessly, and you can even get things like Gemini Live working just as well on the XT as it does on a Google Pixel, for example. But you need to install MicroG for this and enable a load of different permissions, and also use a different app store. The app store that you use here is kind of just like the Google Play Store, and you can search for every app that you need, and you can update all your apps just as you normally would. But remember, this isn't the Play Store, so not everything is always guaranteed to work as well as it would on another Android phone. And then we move to the cameras, because you would expect the cameras on the world's most expensive phone to be the best cameras you can get, but sadly they are a little hit and miss. The main 50 megapixel lens does a really nice job at capturing detail and manages to have some pretty nice dynamic range, and the photos are maybe a little oversaturated, but it's nothing too much where it starts to look dramatically different from real life, and I actually really like the final image that comes from these cameras. the 12 megapixel ultra wide and the 12 megapixel 5.5 times periscope are a little bit more hit and miss. Sometimes they look great and the amount of details captured are similar to that of the main lens, but as soon as the lighting conditions aren't perfect, that's when they both start to struggle a little bit. The ultra wide seems to struggle a lot more in low light, and the whole image lacks any sort of details, and the pictures it produces are just a little soft and is actually not a great image. Then similar can be said for that periscope lens as well. When you get into conditions that aren't perfect or are just a little dark, it tends to struggle capturing any meaningful detail. Don't get me wrong, all the photos that you can capture on the Mate XT are absolutely passable, but for the price that you're paying, you want a little bit more than passable. And then video is almost in a similar boat. If you are static and you're taking 4K shots on that main lens, it looks great. It's just when you start to use the ultra wide or that 5.5 times periscope lens, it's just the details aren't amazing. The stabilization isn't the best that you've seen on any phone, and the video is again passable. It's not as good as it should be on a device that costs €3,500. I think the whole point of the Mate XT is for Huawei to say, look at what we can do and look at what we did first. So if anyone else was to bring out a tri-folding phone, they're second and they're copying what Huawei have already achieved. Don't get me wrong, if you love innovation and tech, then there really is nothing that shows that off more than the Mate XT. And for a first gen product, Huawei have absolutely smashed it out the park. But even if you love tech and you love innovation, should you go out and buy this? Probably not. I mean, the compromises are just a little bit too much for that price tag. It's almost $4,000, like €3,500, and you would never want to have as much compromise as you do if you were to pick up this phone. And outside of China, it just doesn't make any practical sense for anyone to be using this as their everyday phone. Listen, this phone is cool, and if you pick it up, people will stop and look at you as you turn one display into three. And again, I can't give Huawei enough credit here because this is a bit of a marvel, but I'm sure it's not going to be too long until someone like Samsung comes out with their own version of a trifold. If someone else does make a trifold now, they're second to do it. They aren't first anymore, and I'm pretty sure it is not going to look as stylish as the Mate XT, but it probably will have a little bit more polish to justify the kind of money it's going to cost to pick one of these up. Let me know your thoughts though on the Huawei Mate XT. Like, I actually can't tell you enough how much I enjoy opening this phone to be 3 screens and just playing with the amount of positions that you can put it in. It's actually really fun, but like I said, a month later, no one really should be picking this up as their main phone. It's almost like Huawei have released a concept phone here, and again, they just wanted to be first to do it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Before you head off, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you do that, then I will see you in the next video.